Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Profit Builder. I'm Vicki Suter, your host, and these videos are all about helping you build a more profitable contracting business, find more time in your day, and reclaim the joy and fun in what you do again. And this video series that I'm sharing with you is a series of interviews that I've done with business owners and leaders who are successful in their own right in the contracting industry and people who I respect quite a bit. And the reason I chose to do this series is because I think that a lot of times we really could benefit from hearing other people's stories and hearing where people have had to break through and where they had a struggle and they overcame that struggle and how did they do that. And to also be able to hear like tips and ideas from other leaders that they have found to be helpful in their own journey and helping them build better businesses and have better lives. I really enjoyed doing these interviews with people. It was really fun hearing their stories, and I'm very excited to share them with you because I think that you're going to get a lot out of hearing from them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and we'll share the next story. Welcome to another episode of The Profit Builder. I'm Vicki Suter, your host, and I am super excited to have my guest, Alison Heather, here with me as we continue this series on leadership and great leaders in construction. So first of all, Alison, thank you so much for being a guest today.
You're welcome, Vicki.
Alison and I have known each other. We've known each other for like 18 years. It's been a very long time. And I just have such enormous respect for Alison and how watching her grow her business over these years. And Alison, I'm just going to ask you to, before I jump into my questions, just tell people a little bit about you and your business, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Okay. So I came from Ireland in 1985, and I've been pretty much learning my trade and working in my business ever since. I started out as a house painter in San Francisco. I met my business partner, God, I can't track the years, but she and I have been working together for over 30 years at this point. So it's been a long time, and I run a small to medium-sized painting contracting business. We have 30 employees, and we're mostly focused on high-end interior work.
You and I've known each other for a lot of years, and I have an enormous amount of respect and appreciation for you and how you are as a leader. I think that you've done an amazing job with Jill in growing your business, and really appreciate how you take on leading your team and leading your business, and which is why I wanted to include you in this series and interview you and ask you these questions. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in and ask my questions. I'm going to start with the first one. So what do you feel was one of your greatest lessons that you learned along the way that really helped shape you as a leader? Like, is there some particular thing that stands out for you that has influenced or impacted how you started to lead your business or as manage people?
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge, Vicki, that you have been an integral part of building our business and working with us. And one of the things you said to me many, many years ago was just be yourself. And I think that was a very significant word of advice that I was actually able to take on board, that helped me relax into who I was and play to my strengths, acknowledge my weaknesses, and support those weaknesses with other members in the team. So yeah, it's very simple, but it's kind of basic, and it's been huge for me actually over the years.
Yeah. As I'm just listening to you say that, and first of all, thank you for the acknowledgement. And I really, but it's true that that's all we can do is show up as who we are, as opposed to, I think that sometimes as leaders, we think that we're supposed to have all the answers, or we're supposed to be perfect, or we're supposed to know everything. And when we don't, it creates this sort of angst or anxiety. So I love that you just looked at it. And I've seen you do this. You're really good at this, is just looking at, like, what do I know? What do I not know? What do I need to find out? Like, how can I gather that information from people who do know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we can waste a lot of time and energy being critical of ourselves and not accepting and not acknowledging our own, foibles or weaknesses or limitations or whatever you want to call them.
Mhm.
And I think being humble about that and being aware of that is a huge part of running a business. It has been for me anyway.
Yeah. 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 We all have our stuff, right? Nobody's perfect. That's part of what is the beauty of being a human being. I think.
Exactly.
But it's like, yeah, we're not supposed to be perfect, but we definitely hold ourselves to a pretty high standard a lot of the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so the next question I have for you is on discipline. So leading well takes discipline, right? Like a certain amount of discipline in terms of having certain practices. What do you feel are the essential elements or practices of being a good leader that have helped you in your leadership journey? What are some of those? Because I think that's a good segue to the last question too, and what your response is.
Again, I think it's about being who you are and adhering to your own values. And part of that for me has been doing what you say you're going to do. And that means being accountable to other members in your team and your employees and also your customers. Like if your word doesn't mean anything, that's a big deal, I think. And it teaches people about who you are, and it also helps build accountability within the organization, because I think if the leadership isn't accountable and isn't taking responsibility for what's going on in the company, then how can you expect other people to do that?
Yeah, 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 really good point. It's like walking the talk. If you say that's important, then do you actually practice that? Can you just talk a little bit more about in terms of like how that practically shows up day in and day out in terms of your practices, or how you, because there's certain things about how you I know run your business in terms of some of those disciplines and walking the talk and having that um, uh, there's certain practices I know that you have that make you good at being able to support your team and being able to do that. So can you just speak more to that?
Yeah, one of the things I think is being able to put yourself into other people's shoes. And if there's an issue on the table, really looking at it from all the different angles. Again, it comes back to me around accountability. Like one of the things we've really tried to do, and that was a bit of a turning point in our company, was really checking in with our guys and asking them just about their day to day and what was working for them and what wasn't, and getting their input and getting really clear about how to put people in the right place, hold them to a high standard, and figure out how to support them again around their limitations. So, putting the right person for the right job and helping them have the support underneath them.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw something in here about this, because one of the things that I really admire about you in your business is that you guys have a very low turnover rate. You're one of the few contractors I know where you have people coming and calling you, looking for work to come and work for Heather and French Painting. And that's an unusual thing in today, these day and age, with so many contractors struggling to find people to come work for them, good people, quality people. And you're in an in-demand employer. And I love what you just said, which is you really look at, is I heard you, having the right person in the right seat, like making sure that that's a right fit for them to be able to do their best work, holding people to a high standard. But in where you started all of that was you check in with people to find out how's it going, right? Like it's not just a one-way conversation. You guys have done this great job in creating this two-way dialogue with your employees, which I think is part of what's created the culture that you have, where people want to come work for you because they feel valued, seen, heard, right? I mean, when I think about like what makes any of us want to get up out of bed in the morning, it's that we want to have a sense of contribution, of being valued, contributing, like being seen and heard, right? Like that we matter. And that's true for everybody. Whether you're the laborer on a job site, or you're the superintendent or project manager, or the owner, right? We all want to have that sense of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And people do not do their best work when they're stressed out. I think it puts a lot of pressure on people that's unnecessary, and it sort of interrupts natural problem solving abilities. And I just think our industry is inherently stressful. We're on these large high-end projects. There's a lot of variables with all the different personalities and time pressures and products, and working in spaces where there's other crews, and there's just a lot going on all the time. So I think trying to really eliminate any of that additional stress of just getting people stressed out.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the ways that you guys, besides what you were just talking about in terms of checking in with your team, what are the things that you guys do in order to minimize that stress? Because some of the stress, it comes in communication, right?
Yeah.
Or demand, as you're saying, on these high-end projects that you guys are working on.
Yeah, well, I feel like my business partner, Jill, is exceptionally good at figuring out schedule and the different players and how to put people in the right spots. So I'd say that all falls on her, really. A lot of it does. And then communicating. We have a field superintendent, Francisco, who's fully bilingual. And I think that's a key component to our success, is that he's really able to communicate nuance and detail in a very effective way with all of our staff.
That's great. Yeah. I know that he's been a great part of your team. Yeah, you guys speak very highly of him. Yeah, and have for years. And it's fun hearing how he has evolved in his own journey, right? Like he didn't start there one day. He started as a painter, and that's like a great example of somebody that you saw the potential of him and in him, and continued to challenge him to rise up to his next level of contribution and greatness, and his own, ability to be able to really shine in what he does. And he's done a great job. Is there anything else in terms of what you do in terms of eliminating the stress, or just in general of how projects run, or how you run your business? Because it is a stressful business. The industry, I think in general, there's a lot of stress just related to doing construction work wherever you are. And especially, I'll say as a subcontractor, I think that, and being a painting subcontractor, you're working on these large jobs, you have to come in and be very flexible about when you're coming into the equation, because you're at the end of a job, and you're, like there's a whole crew of people, or, trades that came before you show up. There's that whole managing of that. How do you deal with that stress?
I feel like it's all about the pre-planning and really thinking about the project and the individual, particular challenges of each project, and giving a lot of forethought, and having a lot of that stuff already worked out. And I mean, this is all Jill and Francisco in terms of who's going to be right for this project, what are the special elements that are happening here, if there's particular things that the guys need to know about showing up on the job site, just preloading them with all that information, like who's the client and who's the, superintendent on site and what are they going to expect and who's stressed out and who's not. And,
So they know the environment that they're walking into.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. I hope so. I think
Yeah.
mostly they do.
Well,
And they have communication. They have open communication with Francisco if stuff is popping up.
That's awesome.
Like
And
if they're being asked to do stuff that's not part of our scope, for example, which that's a common occurrence. Like the GCs maybe don't know and they just need something done and they're just asking us to do that. So we're pretty aware of all that stuff ahead of time. And hopefully people are happy with us at the end.
well, they are. You guys are in high demand. You have, people who really, I know this from a number of the GCs who work with you, that people really appreciate how you guys run your projects. And that, and what you're describing comes back to that question about discipline, that there's a discipline that you have about how you run projects, that there's a number of things that I just heard in what you said. One of them is, we know what we have to plan for before that job ever begins, to make sure that we're ready to mobilize when it's time to mobilize, so that you can hit the ground running. And the other thing is that your crews are completely clear about what is and what isn't included, and that everything is ready to go day one when you hit that job site. You guys do an amazing job in that pre-planning, which is always what makes a project, any project, no matter where you are in the trades, go smoother. And that's a discipline that you have that I really admire. I think that is definitely a cornerstone of one of the things that makes Heather and French a great company, is that you guys really do have that discipline to always be thinking ahead of where you need to be.
Yeah.
So when you do have to execute, you're moving.
Yeah. And I think part of that, I want to acknowledge you again, because part of it that happened through the working with you. But it's also just getting the right people on the team so that you can delegate, so that you have enough time actually to be a business owner and to be strategic and to pre-plan and to be, not just running and putting out fires and doing good work and working really hard, but it's really taking things up to that next level, delegating, getting the right staff on the team, getting them loaded with what they need to be successful.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because that really is such a key element as you're growing a business, right? If you're going from being a smaller contractor and just a few people, right, to being able to really grow a business where you have a whole team, where you are not the one as the owner who's in the field, that when you have that bandwidth and you've got a team who's executing, you have the bandwidth to, as you were saying, to do that planning and to do that strategizing about how do I make sure that we're ready to hit the ground running. But if you're the one always in the doing mode, that becomes very difficult to rise up above it and sort of see the whole landscape of it. So I think that's really key. And I've watched you guys go through that transition early on. And I think you did a great job. And I've seen you do that too, Alison. I think Jill, that was definitely a transition to happen on the production side, but you also, did that whole transition also on the estimating side, right? You handle the estimating and the finance department, that you both took on getting out of the weeds of things so that you could be more strategic in guiding and driving and directing your business to grow to the next level. But if you were in the weeds, you couldn't have done that, right? It's very hard when you're the one doing as well as planning and trying to, be strategic.
Yeah, you're trying to wear multiple hats and switching back and forth. It's not as high, it doesn't function as well, for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because if Jill was here, I would ask her how she did it with production, but I know that you went through that transition with estimating and having to, let go of being the only one to do estimating, but you also figured out a way to be able to manage the results. And can you just speak to that a little bit about that transition? Because I think there's a lot of times when people struggle with this whole thing of how do I grow my business and trust that the person who I've got now doing the thing that I was doing from a production point of view or estimating point of view is going to do the job well. So can you just speak to how you made that transition for yourself? And again, I'm going to ask you in terms of estimating because you're here, but also if you have something to contribute in terms of how you saw that happen with production, love to hear that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the estimating end, one of the ways we think about it is we hire for character and we also hire for skill. And the estimator that I hired actually had estimating skills, but he didn't have any knowledge of the trade. But I feel like I partly got lucky, but maybe I had just really strong intuition that this was a really solid, hardworking, dedicated, responsible individual. And I took a chance on that. And I think it's worked really well for our company. And I think it's also worked well for him. I just somehow knew that he had those strengths. And because I had interacted with him in the industry, I had a really strong hit of what kind of a character he was.
Nice. So you hired somebody who had the right character, the right attitude, the right kind of thinking, even though he did not have that experience in your trade specifically.
Yeah.
How did you make that transition? So I love that because I think that sometimes we think somebody has to have done exactly that job, but you watched him, you observed him. So first of all, let's just add that to it. You found somebody who you already had sort of a relationship with or knew from at least an ancillary perspective. And then you hired for somebody who had the right attitude that you knew you could train. You didn't just abdicate and go, hey, here, right?
No, I couldn't because he didn't know what he was doing.
Huh?
I said I couldn't because he didn't know the trade. He didn't know how to estimate painting.
So how did that transition go? Because you did a great job with him. And I really appreciate that he came with that, right kind of attitude and that right personality for the job to do a good job, right? So I appreciate that and I want to acknowledge that about him. But there was also this other thing about teaching him and letting go. How did you do those two things?
That's an interesting question. I mean, honestly, it was just step by step. He was shadowing me for a long time, and it was just a daily teaching scenario. And gradually he kept taking on more and more. And I'd say really, I don't know, I'd have to ask him what his perspective, but it was at least a year or two before he finally took off. So it was a huge investment, and it was a daily investment. And now I'm happy to say that he's totally surpassed me, and he's estimating lots of very large, complex projects. So it's really worked out, but it really was about hiring for that character, that drive, that hard, that work ethic, responsible, honest, straightforward. All of those qualities just really stood out to me.
Do you think also that you putting a feedback system in place with him and holding him accountable to a certain result impacted his success? Like you track how much you bid, you track your close rate, right? You've set goals for those things and then track results against them. Now, I also think he was somebody who really appreciated that, but would you also say that that's part of what gave you more peace of mind about being able to know when he was being successful at his job?
Yeah, I think for sure that's been a huge part of it for all of us, really, getting that direct feedback that was based on the data. Like we learned, what was working and what wasn't. like putting a person in a position to run a job where maybe it's not the best fit for them, you end up getting a lower margin because things are not as efficient, they're not flowing as well, and that person's just not in their sweet spot. So yeah, I do feel like that feedback loop is huge, because a lot of times we can just run on our ideas and thoughts about things, like we can think, oh, this project's not going so well, and then we look at the numbers and we find out what's really happening, and sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not. But
Yeah.
the data doesn't lie in a certain way, and we look at it very we look at it in the context of all the different pieces, like who was running the job, who was the staff, how well did we pre-plan, how, what were the issues on the project. So if we have, if there were other extraneous issues with how the job was run or whatever, we totally take that into account as we're looking at all the different pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Was the job bid correctly? Did the person who led the job have what they needed to deliver? And what were the other elements? So I think holding it in that broader context of just the entire team.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate what you're talking about. And I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit about this whole thing about data, because we've worked together for a lot of years, and I have watched you over the years how your and Jill's confidence level about running your business has like that whole thing of having good feedback and having good data. I've seen seems to be like that it's made really a big difference for you. And I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit, like to talk about how running your business with that data has impacted your ability to be able to be more effective at growing your business, leading your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually huge because, again, I mean, Vicky, we used to laugh in the old days about how we were running things on women's intuition. I have to say, we had some good intuition, but it's the same as having actual data. And again, it just helps you keep that bigger picture perspective, and it helps you be more strategic when you're getting that feedback loop.
Yeah.
Like, what is working? And maybe years ago we would have kept working for a GC that we weren't able to be successful on their projects because ultimately it wasn't a great fit. So that feedback is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just gives you the confidence and the courage to say no to things that aren't right for you. That was another turning point.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, just having the confidence. I mean, I think this links back to the question about the data, having the confidence to say no to stuff that's not serving the company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. We want to be profitable and we want to get referrals. So we're always trying to hold both of those things in mind because, it's a business, and the referral part is all the relationship part. Like, how do we actually make it work so that we can win and the contractor or the client can win?
Yeah. Do you think that your having good data allows you to do that more effectively?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, because we get to see what's working and what's not working, and we get to see it quickly. We don't let things, I mean, we would have probably made those decisions eventually anyway, but we can just make them, much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not wasting our time on things that aren't working.
Yeah. 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 I think that you do a great job. You guys do a great job in managing your business based on results and based on data. That as I've watched it, it lets you make, as you say, decisions faster and get into action more quickly. But it also is the thing that it's given you more confidence, yes, in terms of knowing how to grow, where not to grow, where do we focus our time and energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's constantly changing based on, the economic atmosphere in the Bay and what's happening, and, whether homeowner jobs are more available or GC jobs, or all the relationships, what's working, what's not. So really where to invest our resources, our time and our energy.
Nice. I'm going to go to my last question. So do you have, if you were, any final thoughts or advice to somebody who's new to running their business or new to leadership, in terms of a recommendation or just advice that you would have for somebody who might be watching or listening to this?
Besides hire Vicky Suter, I would say be yourself, lean into your strengths, and cover your weaknesses with other team members.
So lean into yourself.
Be yourself, lean into your strengths, and cover your weaknesses.
Be yourself, lean into your strengths, and cover your weaknesses. Nice. Nice.
And hire the right people.
And hire the right people. Yeah.
Slowly.
Yeah. That makes a big difference, doesn't it? Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your time. And like I said, I have such appreciation and respect for you, Alison, and Jill too, and the way that you guys have grown your business and really flourished. And I think that you've done an amazing job at focusing on the right things and building a great team around you of people that are not afraid to step up and to feel that sense of, contribution because of your perspective about how you treat your employees. And I think that, is definitely one of the things that makes you guys great leaders. So yeah, so thank you. Thank you for sharing your time today and for being on the Profit Builder. And for all you who are watching and listening, I hope you took some great things away today. So thanks, Alison.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky.
Well, this interview with Alison wrapped up our series on great leaders in construction and my interviews with some amazing people. If you have not had an opportunity to watch all the interviews, I highly encourage you to do so. I just had such great fun and really appreciated the contribution that everybody made as I did these interviews. And I hope that you took away some tips and some ideas that maybe will help you on your leadership journey. Thank you again for being here, for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time on The Profit Builder.